Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Rachel Silva, and today I'm going to be providing you with a summary and discussion concerning Murray Sidman's Coercion and its Fallout, Chapter 8, which is titled Avoidance. For today's summary and discussion, I have prepared a Prezi presentation, which I will share with you all. Let's get started. All right, in the first section of the chapter, which is titled An Ounce of Prevention, Sidman discusses the difference between escape and avoidance. Regarding escape, we have to have something negative from which to escape. The example that I provided entails evacuating amidst or in the middle of a natural disaster versus in advance. So evacuating in the middle of a natural disaster would be considered escape because we would be escaping from the natural disaster. Whereas the converse of that scenario, evacuating prior to the natural disaster striking the area, would not be considered escape. Regarding avoidance, we can prevent a negative event from happening. And the contemporary example that I provided was panic buying toilet paper during the COVID-19 pandemic. As many of you know, when news of the pandemic ran its course nationwide, many consumers initially flocked to grocery stores to buy bulk supplies of sanitary and hygienic products, but also toilet paper. And this was done in part as an effort to avoid running out of toilet paper, perhaps when people might need it most. And avoidance is actually a form of escape from previous negative circumstances. An example that I gave was having food allergies and taking precautions prior to consuming food, such as asking a waiter for a list of appropriate foods that you might be able to consume, or just informing the waiter that you have food allergies. Under these circumstances, we are escaping having an allergic reaction and having to seek medical attention. The causes of avoidance. Future shock. Avoidance does not discriminate amongst species. Humans actually participate in avoidance behavior very often. An example that I gave was if a precedent for following a law has been set and the consequences are known, one might likely avoid the consequences. For instance, getting a car inspection to avoid getting a ticket or paying a fine. When we avoid, we anticipate and plan to prevent future shocks. Avoidance is explained by past shocks and the presently anticipated reduction in the amount of shocks. For example, the experience of receiving a speeding ticket in the past and then following the speed limit in the present can explain someone's avoidance behavior of speeding again in the future. Avoidance comes from coercion. The causes of avoidance, myth 1 and myth 2. Sidman cites myth 1, which is expectancies as causes. And Sidman refutes this claim when he says that past and present causes of behavior, not future expectancies, provide a more realistic, measurable basis for determining causes of avoidance behavior. We cannot reduce the expectation of an action that has yet to occur. We can only reduce the action itself. And I believe the example that Sidman cites is a child who expects the behavior of his bullies to decrease. The expectation cannot be altered. It is only the behavior of the bullies that can be altered or reduced. Myth 2 is fear and anxiety as causes. Now, Sidman refutes this myth when he says that concrete experiences or environmental contingencies, not abstract concepts such as fear and anxiety, are causally connected with avoidance behavior. Some people, however, often dismiss the validity of environmental contingencies for the sake of preserving more mentalistic attitudes. governing feelings and emotions as causes of avoidance behavior. Attributing internal feelings and emotions as causes for avoidance behavior can detract from the validity of external and even alterable causes of avoidance behavior. The causes of avoidance without warning signals. Punishment is not always easily anticipated. And from there, Sidman goes on to say that sometimes people partake in established routine behavior patterns that are intended to lessen their encounters with shocks or punishers. These patterns are not always visible to others, and Sidman refers to these patterns as unsignaled avoidance. Under these circumstances, coercive control can actually be undermined. And Sidman cites the example of a child remaining home from school to lessen contact with the bully. For instance, if a child is being bullied at school, he or she might opt to remain home instead. Under this condition, contact with the bully would be limited. However, to an outsider, perhaps to one of the child's peers, this scenario might seem mysterious, as Sidman explains it, because the outsider or the peer is not familiar with the situation, with the history of the bullying, of the child being bullied. So as an outsider, the peer might view the child remaining home as out of place or even mysterious, because the peer doesn't recognize the connection between the child and the bully's aversive actions towards the child. All right, I'm going to conclude with my discussion question. Concerning unsignaled avoidance, Sidman says, we are usually puzzled whenever anyone keeps doing something that has no obvious advantage. Can you cite an example of unsignaled avoidance from your own life? In response to my own question, I can think of when I was younger and I was in Girl Scouts, and I was never too fond of going camping. I remember each year we would go on one camping trip, and every time, it was time to, sign our permission forms and actually go on the camping trip, I always backed out at the last minute because I was never too fond of camping. I was younger, so I was a little bit afraid about leaving my home, and even though I would be with my troop, I knew that I would miss my family, and I was a little bit nervous about camping outdoors in an unfamiliar area, even though I was going to be with people with whom I was acquainted. Each year I would always cancel. I would always back out. And some of my friends would say, "Hey, like, where is she? That's kind of odd." Like after a couple years, like some people in my inner circle started to say, "Hey, like, what's going on? What you'll do this in Scouts, you'll sell cookies, but you won't go camping. So what's going on?" So at the time, I never really disclosed why I wasn't a big fan of camping, but I guess I could see how my actions from an outsider's perspective, according to Sidman, would be perceived as mysterious, because I was partaking in unsignaled avoidance in refraining from participating in camping activities year after year. Of course, I had my own reasons, but they weren't disclosed to others at the time. Thank you all so much. I hope you have a great evening.